Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stigma Free Society's Facebook and YouTube live event, Don't Just Survive, Thrive with Daniel Toe. I am Daniel Toe from the Surrey School District. I am a district principal in Ed Services. I'm responsible for mental health and wellness, as well as programs for at-risk and vulnerable youth. I am also responsible for summer school. And today I'm so glad to have my friend and colleague, David Baldasso, from Sullivan Heights Secondary, and he's a principal, and we're going to be talking about school and mental health and education. But don't forget, if you have questions during, you can always email me. I should be able to get those, or text, or Twitter, or if you have questions before and after, feel free to ask them during or after the show. You can also put comments in the Facebook or YouTube comments. Yes, we're very tech savvy here. You can use YouTube or Facebook and put comments there and ask questions, and definitely David and I will try to answer those. But don't forget, David Baldasso and Daniel Toe work for the Surrey School District. You can see the logo on the top of your screen. So we're never going to be able to say anything that violates the district policy. We're always representing the district. That's the nature of our jobs. But hopefully we can provide some really thoughtful things for you to consider as we talk about mental health and wellness and kids and education today. And I want to thank those who logged on now, and thank those who will be logging on after the fact to watch us as we broadcast for the Stigma Free Society. Don't forget to go to the Stigma Free Society's website and to make use of and look at their Stigma Free toolkit and their mental health toolkit and their COVID-19 pandemic toolkit for youth, parents, and educators. So that is my spiel, Dave. What do you think? It's good?
That's awesome. But you're always awesome, Daniel.
So we're just going to get right into it, because half an hour goes by so fast. Often in every interview, we're like, oh, that was half an hour. That's crazy. It's possibly because I talk too much. So David Baldasso, principal of Sullivan Heights. I think I met you when you were a teacher and you're coaching sports, and then you became a vice principal, and then now our principal. Why don't you just give a bit of history of yourself and education, why you got into education, and why admin and not teaching, because they're both two honorable paths that people travel in our field.
Very much so. Very much so. So I come from a family of educators, so that was just a natural progression for me. In our district here, I taught at SEMI, and was fortunate enough to be in the International Baccalaureate program, along with a lot of geography students that I taught. So that was great. My draw to administration was really, I think, to try and help some positive change with our schools. Change is always scary, but it's always a good thing too. So off I go to Queen Elizabeth. Yes. Unbelievable experience.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Such a great school. Spent 5 years there. Followed that with 5 years at Elgin Park, 4 years at Guildford Park, and here I am at Sullivan.
Yeah, and administration and teaching, I've often said, is different, but also the same, because whether you're a teacher, you're a vice principal, you're also trying to lead students and lead the education process and lead curriculum so that we can do what's best for kids. I don't know that any of us get into the profession for anything other than that.
Exactly.
Right? But you've been a teacher, and I'm just going to get to the questions now so we don't forget about them. We are talking about mental health and wellness, and that is the focus of the Stigma Free Society and our talk today. And you've been a teacher, vice principal, and principal all over the district. You just described that in many different areas, both in our higher socioeconomic areas as well as sort of in the inner city, in many different schools, different populations. In your mind, what are the biggest and most consistent across the board mental health issues high school students face? Or is it different depending on where you are? You've been in Elgin Park, which is very different than QE, different from Sullivan, different from Guildford. Are the mental health issues different for different areas, or is it really depend, or is it broad-based, the same? And the reason I ask that is because we often treat mental health as if it's one thing, but maybe it's many different things. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is many different things, and I think that it manifests itself differently. There isn't one. I don't know that socioeconomics has as much of an impact as we might think it does. I think that's a bit of a misdemeanor. Like, it's a situation where in some schools we assume that mental health is so much more prevalent, because it's right there. It's in front of us. It's every day. We see it. It's what we live.
Right.
And so we just assume, oh well, for example, if it's in a lower socioeconomic area, then we just assume that it's more prevalent there. But
Right.
in reality, I think it's prevalent everywhere, and I think that there could be as many cases of or situations for kids who struggle with mental health, whether you're in the highest socioeconomic neighborhood or the lowest socioeconomic neighborhood. It's how I think we react to it and the assumptions we make around it, right?
Yeah.
I know obviously we're talking stigma free, right?
Yes.
And so if it's in front of us every single day and we're living it, then we're acknowledging it more often. But if it's sort of in the shadows and it's not there, then secretly I think that there is that stigma still attached to it, and so it's not as prevalent in your face as, I don't like using that word, but it's not right there. It's people
Right.
aren't living it. They are living it, but we're not seeing it and we're not talking about it.
Right.
And I think that when you talk about what are the big mental health issues, I mean, anxiety is always the first one that comes to mind.
Yes.
And it presents itself in different ways. And my learning experience around working with young people who struggle with anxiety is that it manifests itself really differently depending on who that individual is. And it
Right.
was a huge learning curve for me personally, working with a student who was very highly anxious, but very extroverted that way. And
Mm.
that anxiety manifested itself very, very differently from some other kids who were in some of our district programs, and they too struggled with anxiety, but presented very, very differently. And
Yeah.
so, how we react to that, how we work with them, is really dependent on the individual.
Well, and I would say, like, having worked in similar schools to that you've worked in, the stress that a child who has lots of everything, high socioeconomic status, but the parents are working all the time. They're almost, there's the pressure to achieve. There's a pressure to go to post secondary. Has the same anxiety and stress as a person who a kid who's from an inner city school who now needs to worry after school. Hey, I gotta go work at this job so I can help feed my family along with my parents because we all need to work in order to survive.
Exactly.
The
Yep.
stress level, even though the
Yes.
stress about different things, are very similar, right? Do you
Yes.
think?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Absolutely, Daniel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And and part of that too, I talk about the idea around depression
Yeah.
and sad, we've got a lot of kids who are sad and they struggle with that.
Yeah.
And some of them struggle with it really quietly and others struggle with it really openly. And it's hard. And I don't know that it matters, like you said, whether you're at this level of socioeconomics or you're at this level of
Yeah.
socioeconomics. The stressors may be different, but people are struggling.
So I'm veering slightly off question, but I will get back to the second question. Do you think, though, now that you're working in these schools, you've worked in so many schools, do you think that mental health, we talk about it a lot, it's on TV a lot, Bell Let's Talk, all those things, but do we really value mental health as an actual wellness issue in our schools? Do you think we do that enough? And the only reason I ask that is because it's not tangible. And with
Yeah.
anything intangible, it's hard to quantify
Yeah.
whether it's happening or not.
Yeah. Daniel, it's an interesting piece. Every time people ask me a similar question to that, I think of our good friend Coralie. And
Yes.
Coralie once said to me, David, we were talking about students with learning disabilities, right?
Yes.
She said, if a kid walks through the door with a broken leg on crutches or in a wheelchair, everybody's running to that kid to help them out, open the door, do whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
When we have kids walk through the building with a learning disability or anxiety, or they're struggling with mental health, it's not there. We're not seeing it. So we're not reacting to it. So while we may be talking about it,
Yes.
what are we doing about it? Are
Yes.
we changing things? Are we doing things differently? And I don't know. We're acknowledging it that it exists, but are we changing how we're reacting to it or what we're doing about it? Are we holding the door open as an analogy, right?
Yeah.
Or are we just saying, oh yeah, we need to open that door, but we're not
Yeah.
doing anything to open it?
Well, it's like a concussion in sports, right? It's hard to see that. Guy breaks their leg, you get him off on a stretcher, people are cheering, yeah, I'll get better. Someone's concussion, they go off on concussion protocol, no one knows why they've left. and it's actually probably worse concussion protocol than a broken leg,
Yeah.
right? Because some people never recover from that. So
Exactly.
mental health is very similar. Well, this actually leads right into my second question. You're a principal of a large secondary school. You're still growing. You're renovating. Every time I drive by, I see a building sort of going up. Do you feel there are enough community supports in your area, like your physical geographical area for your secondary school, for mental health? Do you think we need more in the area where your school is? And just so people know, it's South Newton in Surrey. So in South Newton, Surrey, or you've been in other schools like QE and Elgin, do we have enough community supports for kids and families to deal with mental health issues?
Yeah, my initial thought when I was thinking about this was there's never enough community resources. Right. And let me be a little bit clearer with that. When I'm talking about that, I'm saying specific to the demographics of that community.
Right.
So the demographics in Guildford are going to be different than the demographics in Marriott's catchment, right?
Yes.
Or so one of the things at a previous school, am I allowed to name previous schools, Daniel?
Yeah, you've worked there.
So one of the things that we were working with at Guildford, we had a meeting with the North End MCFD and their mental health unit, and we talked about the idea of having a clinician attached to the school.
Yeah.
What an incredible thing that could happen for our kids to have, a direct line to a clinician when a student is really suffering or struggling with a mental health piece, to be able to pick up a phone and say, hey, listen, we need to do this referral. We need to fast track this referral. And I'm not saying that every single student is going to need that fast track, but there are some that do.
Yeah.
And that waiting game, that's a tough one. That's a really, really hard thing to struggle with. And so, having a group that works in conjunction with the school-based team, that would be an incredible thing.
Now you mentioned community supports that are, and by the way, if anybody watching has a question, I know there's some people watching together in a large group. I see your vice principal just texted a question there, and maybe it's an answer. But if anybody watching has questions, feel free to ask. But you had mentioned community supports that are pertinent to the cultural identity of the community.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that a bit more? Because it's easy to put in, here's a support, but does the support fit the community?
Yeah. So when I think about that, I think about the cultural piece, right? The cultural sensitivity to it. Okay. So, at Elgin, we had a lot of international students.
Yeah.
And I don't want to gloss it. I don't want to generalize.
Yeah.
But I for a period of time I had 2 homestays in my own home who were international students, and one of them had a tough go. And so specific supports for that kind of, every demographic, but that cultural sensitivity, some understanding of the cultural aspect and how we can, manipulate it, massage it, make it work for each cultural group. Surrey is a very, very diverse city, unbelievably diverse. It doesn't matter, you can go into any different neighborhood and different languages, and it's such a huge, rich cultural community. But our approach to mental health has to be cognizant of that. We have to understand what's happening and have that cultural sensitivity to tweak it just right for that community, in my opinion.
No, and absolutely. I think that's something that we sometimes forget. Like, we think we can throw in a resource, or we throw in, even like I run all the hospital programs, but different people going to hospital require different services, right?
Yes.
And we throw in just a blank, vanilla service into a school where everyone speaks a different language. Like I have an entire talk about, and actually I'm speaking about it next week, about international students you mentioned, right? And people don't realize when they come here, when international students come here for the first time, they're already have a higher propensity to be anxious because they've left their home, they've left their family, they left their country, they've left everything they know to a place where they don't speak the language, they don't understand the system, and they're living in a stranger's house. Tell me any of us that would be comfortable in that situation.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So and yet we say, oh, just talk to this counselor that you may not even understand.
Yeah. That's right.
right?
That's right.
Um,
Yes.
as we talk about this, and we're being hosted by the Stigma Free Society, so it's only fair we talk about stigma. You're raising a teenager. You told me your son's going to a local school. I won't mention the school, so no one chases him down. The 2 viewers we have are going to chase him down. But you're also the head shepherd. I like to use that word because you're always corralling people, right? The head shepherd of about 1,600, if I'm correct. Sullivan has about 1,600.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
teenagers. What are some areas of stigma that are prevalent in our high school communities, and how do you think we combat these? I think of social media. I think of all these different issues that kids
Yeah.
face daily. Your son faces
Yes.
daily.
Yes.
What are some of these, and how can we combat them as a community?
Yeah. So you bring up the one about social media, and that's it. That's a huge one. He and I we've talked a lot about that, and thankfully he has. And I've asked him, does he have any interest in it? No interest at all, which is a great thing because
So
I think
good.
that a lot of right.
My daughter has no interest. I gave her a phone. She looked at the compass. I gave my 9-year-old a phone. She's like, "Hey, I can see north." I'm like, "Thank God." Madeline,
Yes.
so good.
Absolutely.
And then she goes,
Absolutely.
"There's a
You'd rather
coffee
be on
around here."
Craigslist. Oh,
Yeah. Anyways, keep
You'd
going.
rather
Sorry,
be on
interrupted. Keep
Craigslist.
going. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the idea, so stigma for me, when I think about that, I think we're talking about mental health,
Yeah.
but and someone someone admits that they're struggling with mental health. How do we respond? Right?
Yeah.
What do we say about it? So that's one piece. When someone gets to the next step, now they're accessing help.
Yes.
How do we react to it? Are we reacting the same way when they say to us, I'm really struggling with this?
Yes.
Are we reacting the same way? They come to us and they say, well, now I'm seeking help. I'm getting help. Are we treating them the same way, or are we treating them differently? So there's that piece.
Yeah.
It's real tough. But we need to be supportive all the way through that whole process.
Yeah.
Right. Never letting a gap develop anywhere in that circle of support, in my mind. Right. So when we talk about stigma and what kids are dealing with and struggling with, and that social media piece is a huge one. Right. Pointing, and saying things about, like, kids really struggle with their own identity.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece. Right. How do they fit? I listen to my son and his friends talk, and they do that comparison of, well, when they were in elementary school, now they're in high school, and they not so much the word cliques, but friend groups, right? So it's huge. It's that kind of melting pot, but that's tough too, because if you're ever perceived as being different, that makes life even harder.
And we worry about that as parents. Right? I'm just going to dive a little bit into parenting. Like I have a kindergarten and a grade 4, and when I drop them off, I worry about, are they going to play? Who are they playing with? Are they standing by themselves on a log somewhere? Are they alone? I went to grade 1-2 camp with my daughter, and the thing that I was worried about, but then really proud of, was there was a point in time where she was playing with a bunch of friends and they didn't want to play with her anymore. I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks. I'm just sitting there, right? Because I'm actually responsible for that area as the camp leader. And then she just goes off and plays by herself and has the greatest time. And I asked her, like, didn't that bother you? She's like, no, they didn't want to play with me, so I'm going to do something myself. Yeah. I'm fortunate that my daughter is like that. Not all kids are like that. The loneliness they feel from peer pressure and peer groups. And you deal with that as a teacher and as a principal. Like, how do you talk to those kids that when you see a kid on a bench by themselves crying, how do you even deal with that? Your vice principals who are watching right now, how do they deal with that?
I use the term, we got to do the right thing. What's the right thing to do? Is the right thing to leave that person, struggling with whatever it is they're struggling with, or is the right thing to go and offer some help? Right? Like, and that doesn't matter wherever it is. And I think that trying to impart that on young people at an early age is beneficial all the way along. We're a community. We have to act like a community. We have to support each other. We have to look out for each other. And sometimes that's hard work, but that's work worth doing. Right? Yeah. So I like using that line. What's the right thing to do? What would be the right thing to do in that situation? Do you leave? And hopefully they didn't contribute to that young person sitting there crying, right?
Yeah.
Because now the right thing is, hey, we got to apologize, right? That kind of thing. But
I mean, you deal with kids, and some of the. I'm veering off the questions a bit, but this is the similar type of question: is that you sometimes have the perpetrator or the bully or the person that's causing the issue, and then also the victim. And they're both with you, but they're also, again, like your kids. Like one kid tries something to another kid, they're still eating dinner together, they're still going to be together, they're going to wake up the next day going to dressing for school together. How do you deal with that in your school? Like, short of kicking one out, which we sometimes unfortunately have to do when there's crime involved, but those regular daily circumstances when kids aren't getting along, but they're in the same class, sitting beside each other, right? Eating lunch together on the same teams. How do you deal with that as an administrator, like you, or as a teacher even?
Yeah, I think that's part of that conversation of helping kids to understand where their responsibility lies in any situation. And if it is that sort of situation where there's that bully and the target, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Like, in that kind of a situation, it's empowering the person who's being bullied and taking that sort of control and power, diminishing that for the person who's inflicting that. Right. And that's all about that conversation and investing that time with both those kids, right?
Yeah.
Whomever it may be, right? And helping the person who's wanting to exert that kind of control to understand the impact that they're having on not just that person, but everyone else around them, because everyone is impacted by that, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just one person. There's always more than one who's impacted. So, people who stand by and just watch it happen, they're being impacted too, because they may be thinking in their mind, I should do something, but what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's so now we need to empower everybody else and diminish this.
Yeah.
Right? And
absolutely.
if we're empowering all of these kids, then this is going to get diminished, because there's going to be more than one person that's going to say, hey, wait a second, that's not right. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, here's the $24 million question. What do you think kids need most when they attend school? Like, kids love going to school, whether they agree with it or not. Like, those kids that I work with you on within my alternate programs, it's not that they're not coming to school, they're just not going to class, right? But they're still coming. What do you think kids need the most as they attend school? And it could be more than one thing.
Yeah, there's so many things. And when I thought about this question, it's they need a smile. They need a smile when they walk through the door. They need to know that somebody cares.
Yeah.
They need somebody to say hello. Like, you matter. You matter.
Yeah.
Right? Every single time they walk through the door. And this is the thing is I think about a student that I worked with, and somebody asked me, well, how do you know that when you're smiling at them or you're saying hello to them, how do you know that works? Because that person comes to school every day.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Yeah.
If they weren't coming to school every day, then I would know something's wrong. If this is the best place for them to be, if home is a struggle, if being someplace else is a struggle, and this is the best place for them, then we're doing our job right. So they need empathy, they need care, they need compassion, they need our support. They need to be heard, and they need to be validated.
Yes. I remember, I'm sure you have circumstances like this, but I remember some of the loneliest kids that I had in my classes, and then they would, I'm like this all the time. So fairly energetic class, I know their names, and then years later, they either see me on the street or they find me on Facebook or something strange like that, and they're like, "Oh, you know what kids say to me? You probably don't remember me, but," and when I say, "Hey, I know, like, you're this person, and you're this person's brother, and you played on these teams," it's a shock. You know my name.
Yeah.
You know my name. That's years after graduation.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I think just people want to be valued. They want to feel that someone cares about them. And Carla, your vice principal, who I also work with on mental health things, says that as well, right? They need to belong. They need to feel like they belong. They need to be valued. Well, see, I told you, half an hour goes by fast. Last 5 minutes to wrap up and finish this phrase. A caring adult is someone who
is willing to listen.
Quantify that.
Okay, so we need to, like I said, these kids need to be heard, valued, validated, and they need somebody that's going to listen to them. And sometimes their message is it's all over the map, and we just need to take some time and just listen to what they're saying. Sometimes they're saying it verbally, right? They're just, it's out there. And sometimes it's in behavior. So we need to listen to everything, right?
Mm.
So a caring adult to me is someone who's willing to listen and do the right thing to support kids. And it's going to be, sometimes it's such hard work. It's really tough, but that's work worth doing, right? And I've said that before. So showing that compassion, showing that empathy, showing that care, patience.
Yeah.
So if we're willing to start by just listening, then and giving these kids an opportunity to just be themselves in whatever capacity that is. They could be way up here, they could be way down here. They just need somebody to listen, to start that conversation.
That's great. And because we have another minute or two, maybe I'm going to try and steal some parenting advice from you because you have teenagers and I don't yet. How do you teach your kids or your son? How do you teach your son to be that kind, compassionate person while he is struggling to be a grade 8 teenager at the school?
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Because being a teenager is really, really tough. Like them trying to control themselves is tough enough, right? Being focused on what's happening around them and who's who. But I try and emphasize always that you start by being kind, because you have no idea what anybody else is dealing with when they walk through the door. So you just have to be kind. And that's the first step, right? Whoever it is. And if you recognize that somebody is struggling, then you need to be the first person to be there and saying, hey, what do you need? Right? How can I help? And that just comes from being that good person, being a good person who's willing to listen and willing to do the work and stand up for somebody,
And I'll ask you the same question my daughter asked me when I said something similar. What if they're not being kind to me, Dad?
That's a real tough one. But I think we have to rise above that and continue to be a good person and just be a kind person. Because again, it comes back to, well, why are they doing that? What's happening for them? If you're good and you're okay, then that's not going to change who you are. You're going to be the same good person you always are, right? What's happening for this person? How do I understand that? And how do I interact with that? What am I going to do differently to make that better?
Well, David, that's good teacher advice. That's good parenting advice. I'm glad we've said similar things, because that means I'm probably doing it right. Your kids survived. Mine should too. I don't know if anybody or so. I see some people from the Stigma Free Society also logged on. Does anybody have any questions for David? Or else, hearing none, you're going to hear the goodbye music. And but also, I know that David is more than open. If we get questions on email or whatever, I will pass them on to him, and we can definitely answer it that way as well. I also want people to know the Stigma Free Society. I'm not sure, David, if your teachers or any of them had a chance to log on, but they've done the Balancing Our Minds for kids from grades 5 to 12 the last 3 weeks in April. Like, they've done one every week, and it's been awesome. I encourage any teacher or any class or any administrator to check those out on the district's Microsoft Stream. It's private, but you can still look it up and watch all the wonderful speakers that the Stigma Free provided for our district. I don't know, did you get a chance did your people get a chance to see that, or I don't even know?
Yeah, we shared that with our staff.
Yeah.
Good.
Hopefully there's people watching it either before. I know it's hard to watch people live. It's, well, in a high school block, it's like 1:16 to 2:23. How do we log on at 1 o'clock? It's very hard. But hopefully, we get people watching that as well. And thank you for sharing that with your staff. So if there are no questions, I want to thank everybody. I got to get the music going. It's always a funny show of me trying to get the music started as I say goodbye. David, please stay on as we end, just so I can thank you and say goodbye to you. But thank you all for watching the Stigma Free Society broadcast. Today I was speaking with David Baldasso, the principal of Sullivan Heights Secondary from the Surrey School District. If you have any questions for us, feel free to email me. This is not the right slide. This is the right slide. Please, David, sometimes mistakes happen on the internet. Email me at to_d@surreyschools.ca. There's my phone number, there's the Twitter, and there's my blog. If you need to reach me or reach David for any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. This is Daniel Toe for the Stigma Free Society and the Surrey School District, signing off Thank you so much for watching. Please leave any comments underneath in the comment section. If you want me to talk about any other topics, or if you have any speakers that you want me to bring onto the show, please feel free to ask for that as well. I also monitor the comments for the Stigma Free Society. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching. Oops, this is also not the right slide. See how my hand just moves stuff? Brutal. Anyways, we're going to end with a picture of David. Here we go.
There it is.